Demeo is an epic VR RPG tabletop dungeon crawler, which you can play solo, or play with 3 others with cross-play support as you venture through dungeons and make your way to the boss. In each dungeon of Demeo, your goal is to navigate through the board to find a key which unlocks the gate to the next level. There are 3 levels to each dungeon, and after finishing each level you are greeted by Klepto's Bazaar to purchase any cards with the gold you've acquired during your travels before venturing forth to the next level of the dungeon, making your way to the depths of the realm to find and slay the boss. Hello everyone, this is Kory, and in this series we will help you answer the question if Demeo is worth it. As always, we talk about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and then I give you my opinion and tell you whether I think it's worth it. If you enjoyed this video and want more, then make sure to subscribe. I review every game I play in VR. So, let's get right into the good stuff. Each dungeon run has 3 levels, with the 3rd level having a boss fight. You can play single player with 1, 2, 3, or even 4 characters, and you control all of them. Or you can play multiplayer with up to 4 players in cross-play matchmaking. Yo.
Oh, I found the exit.
Hey, ThisKory.
Or bring your own friends in a private lobby. So let's quickly talk about the mechanics in Demeo, and how you move around and take actions in each level. You can zoom in and out, rotate, lift, and move around the board using the grip functions on your controllers. Grabbing with both hands and expanding out will zoom into the board, and pinching your hands together will zoom back out. You can grab with both hands and rotate the board with a twisting motion, and if you grab with just one hand, then you can move around laterally. You can also use the thumbstick to lift the board so you can see it straight on, instead of looking down at it. To move your character, you simply point at them and press the trigger to pick them up. There are indicators on the board which tell you how far you can move each character, and moving your character costs an action point. You have 2 available action points each turn, and you could use them however you'd like. Attacking, moving, and using a card which costs an action point will use one. Some cards do not cost action points, and this is indicated with a number at the top of the card. Each card also gives more information depending on what it does, and cards can vary from healing potions, area of effect spells which can hit multiple enemies, or even vortexes which can pull in a group of enemies and does damage, which also sets them up for future AoE attacks. If we talk about the game aspects, a full dungeon run can take anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours, depending on many factors including luck and how quickly you navigate through each dungeon with your party. Each dungeon is random, which means the layout and enemies on each level will vary. This adds much to the replay value. Unfortunately, there are currently only 3 dungeons to complete, with more coming in the future. Characters start with a set amount of cards and acquire more cards by leveling up, looting chests, or purchasing them between levels at the bazaar using gold which you found during your campaign. Characters level up by killing enemies, and there are currently 5 characters to choose from, being a bard, hunter, sorcerer, assassin, and guardian, with each of them having their own unique abilities. Each class has their own unique cards which will stay in your hand and refresh, but other cards will be removed from your hand upon use. There's also a limit to the amount of cards you can carry in your hand, so make sure your hand is not full when you level up or open a chest, because the card that you acquired will be thrown away. If you're playing with others and your character dies, you have a few turns to revive them, and you do this by placing your character over theirs. If you die too many times, you can't be revived again. They can also revive themselves if they have a healing potion. If your team is weak, you can also use a healing shrine located on each level to pick them up and heal them to full. Throughout the map, there are various types of bombs which can be utilized to take down enemies as well. There are bombs which freeze, make a poison cloud, explode, and even vortexes which pull in enemies towards them. You can also use spell cards to create these bombs and activate them by hitting them with a ranged ability. With all of this, at the end of every level, you gain XP which levels up your overall account and unlocks cosmetic items such as dice and character skins. Enemies will have weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and these can be seen when you grab an enemy and lift them up for more information. Freezing an enemy and then using lightning on them will deal extra damage, or attacking an enemy from behind with the assassin class will give you extra damage bonus as well. This adds a layer of excitement to the gameplay, and keeps things fun as you progress through dungeons for the first time. I should also mention that if you're taking your time in dungeons and want to continue at a later time, there's a save feature you can use, which works with multiplayer games as well. There's also the option to turn off your surrounding musty basement environment if you want to focus more on the board. When playing with fewer heroes, the enemies scale back in numbers, which makes it a little bit easier to compensate for fewer players. I actually played a solo campaign with a single character, but it seemed impossible to complete a full dungeon run. I'll talk more about this in the bad stuff. That being said, I did enjoy playing Demeo. It kept me engaged with constant battles, and the boss fights can be quite a challenge as you strategize with your party, with what enemies to focus on, and where to reposition as you get bombarded by hordes of enemies. As you can see, Demeo has quite a bit of depth, and I enjoyed learning everything about it as I played through the game. There's an in-game guide you can read which will help answer most of your questions, but there are some things which you will have to learn on your own, and this brings me to the bad stuff. To start, open multiplayer lobbies are dumb. The devs really need to fix how open lobbies work, because it's horrible. You start a dungeon, and people can join and leave as they wish.
Alright, I gotta go. Sorry. Damn, this is unfortunate.
Okay, bye.
This sounds nice, right? No, because the game already feels very casual, and this only makes things worse as people die, leave, and then you suddenly get a new player with a fully healed character to help. This also means if you're in the middle of a fight and about to die, someone can join in and immediately assist you, which just feels wrong. The reason this is such a poor design is that people will enter and leave constantly, leaving the dungeon run feeling meaningless with empty relationships with other players. This also causes reckless gameplay from players as they open a bunch of doors, aggro enemies, die, and then leave the game, leaving you and whoever else is with you to deal with the remaining chaos. I also had a bug where someone left the game while it was their turn, and the game would not release their turn. This meant that we had no choice but to leave the game, since no one was there to make a play.
Yeah, I can't kick it. This is it? The game's broken and we're done?
While open lobbies are very flawed, private games are much more enjoyable since you will have a reliable party. Outside of multiplayer lobbies, single player with one character is a joke. Why they have this option in the game, I have no idea. I've tried multiple attempts at single character dungeon runs with various strategies, and none of them were successful. The Guardian was the furthest I've gotten, but he ended up taking his max health and damage in a single turn after he was swarmed by every enemy on the board.
With the last champion downed, your quest comes to a sudden end.
And I can't even imagine trying to complete a solo run with any other character. I'm also confused as to why you can do a single player run and control 4 characters, but you cannot do a multiplayer run with 2 people controlling 2 characters each. This would be a nice addition to have. Enemies continue moving around the board, and some enemies I noticed coming towards my location from across the board even though I was not engaged in combat with them. I didn't enjoy having to worry about the entire board of enemies, and this adds zero strategy to the game as you're constantly bombarded by all enemies on the board. By the time you finish killing one group, there are already more enemies you have to fight, which made their way towards you. This either has you standing in a single room for 30 minutes as you continue fighting, or running away and across the map to scout for the key to unlock the next level. I would like Demeo to work where each room that you open is the only room you have to worry about, so you don't have to worry about the entire board of enemies, because the enemies can and will open doors and make their way towards you. Things become overwhelming very quickly, and at that point in the game, it's not about killing enemies as much as it is about navigating the board, finding the key, and then running away from enemies to find the exit to the next level. I don't enjoy this type of gameplay. I don't think it feels good, and I don't think it fits well in a game like this. To be honest, I think it's a very boring and monotonous style of gameplay. Once you have the key, fighting enemies is pointless and risky, unless you want to level up and get access to more cards, or search the map for gold to buy more cards for the next level. A better approach would be making the enemies more of a challenge and make the gameplay room by room, so that when you enter a new room, you're set up for a new challenge, and this leaves the question up to you of whether you want to continue clearing rooms for loot and risking your lives, or make your way to the exit after you have acquired the key. Currently, there's no reason to continue leveling other than to acquire more cards. Your characters do not get stronger, and you do not get any points to improve your character with each level, which leaves things feeling a bit empty. Camera movement was fatiguing with the index controllers, because you have to squeeze the controllers each time. Other controllers may not have this issue because the grip function is easier to press. The camera movement can definitely be improved as well, and I personally would want to use the thumbstick to fly across the board on the X and Y axis and rotate the camera with my other thumbstick, but there aren't any proper comfort options which allow this. I know this game isn't related at all, but I want to quickly mention After the Fall for its abundance of comfort options. More VR games need to realize that there are many ways people enjoy playing, and adding options so they can play comfortably is incredibly underdeveloped by VR devs. Speaking of the camera, when you finish a game, the camera position is reset, and you're left sitting on top of the game menu and have to reposition yourself every time. This makes me question whether the developers are even trying to iron out these fundamental issues, since the game has been released for 8 months now. They have this big roadmap ahead of them, which is great, but they are failing to fix fundamental issues, which makes me worry that none of these issues I brought up will ever be addressed. Health numbers only pop up when you point at enemies without any cards in your hand. I'd like to see an option to see health bars permanently when enemies and heroes are visible, or at least see health bars when I hover over an enemy with a card. I can see why they don't display health bars permanently, because they are quite large and with many enemies on board, the health bars would overwhelm the visual aesthetic, but we definitely need more options here. After spending 2.5 hours going from level 1 to level 3 in a dungeon, and dying to the final boss, I earned 500 XP for my time, which isn't even a single reward unlock. Just wanted to point that out. Also, why do we need to see other characters' hands? They made an effort to eliminate hands, which get in the way by adding colored orbs which represent players' hands who are not taking their turn. But why do we need to see hands of the players who are taking their turn? I was trying to strategize and figure out my next move while it was another player's turn, but I couldn't see the board since that player's hands were absolutely massive and preventing me from seeing the board. These types of decisions make me question Resolution Games' design philosophy, because it's incredibly flawed. I'm really concerned about the future development of Demeo. They just released a brand new expansion featuring the Bard, but they left us with 0 changes to improve the game's countless flaws. There are many unanswered questions that are not listed in the tutorial or help section. As your characters level, do they acquire the same cards each time? If you acquire the same cards each time you level a character, I'd like to see what I will unlock next so I can anticipate my next move. Even if they added some sort of loadout system where I could choose what cards are given at each level, would make gameplay more engaging and keep me playing longer as I refine my loadout for each game or unlock new cards to use. I was pretty excited because Demeo's store page says you can build your own deck, but this is not true. There is no deck building system in Demeo. You can, of course, purchase cards from the bazaar between levels, but there is not a deck of cards that you build and pull cards from, as they suggest. Unfortunately, Demeo leaves things feeling a bit bland due to the lack of incentive to continue playing over the long run. So, is it worth it? There was a lot to talk about with Demeo, because it has a lot to offer, both good and bad. With randomized dungeons, things feel fresh each time you play. And with 3 dungeons and 5 playable characters, with more coming, there's a lot of replay value, and if the developers play their cards right, pun intended, and continue developing the game and add more features, then Demeo will be a great game to enjoy for a long time. With that being said, Demeo is not left without issues. Demeo is a poor attempt at a potentially awesome tabletop RPG in VR. Some might find that only 3 dungeons is not enough, and there are many missing comfort options and gameplay elements which would drastically improve the quality of gameplay. Not to mention the horrible open matchmaking system, impossible single character campaign, and lack of any permanent character progression to keep me playing. I know I said a lot about the bad things in Demeo, but in the end I still had some fun playing it, and I will probably be playing it more as it improves. It's one of those games which is addicting, even though it's not perfect and still needs a ton of improvement. I honestly hope this video will reach the devs, and they will take some of the issues I mentioned into consideration when improving Demeo in the future. However, this seems unlikely, because they just released a new expansion, but didn't care to take the time to fix any of these issues. Demeo has a lot of potential, and while it's currently not in its best state, it's still very enjoyable, And while I personally don't think it's worth it until they fix many of these issues, it can still be fun if you don't expect much, especially if you have a friend or two to play with. But I'm curious whether you think it's worth it. Let me know in the comments down below. I post new videos every week, so if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when I release new videos. Liking the video helps a ton and shows your support. And if you want to know what's on my mind, then follow me on Twitter. Links are in the description down below. As always, make sure you think for yourself, which means question yourself, do what makes you happy, and I'll see you all next time.
Much better.